All right, so I need somebody else now. All right. Come on. Everybody's got it. Physically or mentally, it doesn't really matter. So we're just going to go through the process, just until you get... I just add, you know...
Better start quick before it
Yeah.
goes away.
Remember, who was in my conversation at Hypnosis Workshop? I told you. So you have to get to know your friends, what you're saying. Pretty much, yeah. The bottom line for this is that the nervous system doesn't care if it's pain, physical or emotional. And the pathways that it uses are the same for resistance, for pain, or a suggestion that we don't want to do. So you can engage the same mechanisms. You can literally have people resist themselves right out of pain. You just saw me do it. That was with her.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we're used to dealing with pain in very standard ways. We take it head on. But the moment we change our perspective, how we view this, the information, to me she wasn't in pain. The reason that was is because what she had was a set of information that was being translated by her system and expressed as pain. From the world according to David, it's just information. Her instrument can play any song. She can play that song fast or slow. She can play it in reverse. And when you do that, I'm using a metaphor, obviously. She can interpret it and express it any way she wants. The nervous system has that capacity. You haven't begun to tap into a tenth of the pleasure and the abilities and the potentials of your nervous system. We're doing a 2-day on erotic and sensual hypnosis after this training. We're going to go deep dish into those aspects. Okay? We're not just going to be exploring orgasm, that's part of it. There's going to be sensuality enhancing. We're going to go into ecstatic states, like, when we activate the chakras, hyperacuity stuff. We're going to go into a lot of different things, but for recreational purposes, and you can take these things back, and you can use them clinically. There's all kinds of synergy here, but because we tend to chunk down, we always tend to think in terms of getting smaller, getting more specific, getting more context dependent. We don't see the connections. Only lose the power. So you had some issues?
Yes, 2 issues. One, physical, pain about 7, 8 here. Kind of a bruising, I'm not quite sure what I did. The other one's emotional. I'm going through a divorce.
Oh, okay. Okay. You should see the YouTube video where I cured a broken heart.
I really do need to see it.
Did the exact same technique. You went from being heartbroken to having a sense of inner peace. And you saw it.
Yes,
you were there when
I was there when you did it.
Okay. So let's start with this one. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. On a scale of 0 to 10, rate this sensation.
About 7, 8.
Okay. So close your eyes. Look at the feeling with your inner eyes. I want you to notice that there's a color connected to that feeling. What's the color? First impression. Turquoise. Interesting. I want you to reach in with all that turquoise energy. Make sure you get it all. That's your eye, brother. Take it out. Hold it in your hands in front of you. Yeah. Just know there's more than this. Good. Now, as you look at it, I want you to ask the question. Did the color change or stay the same?
Got a little bit.
Excellent. Now I want you to notice it's moving and spinning in a certain direction. What's the direction? First, go. Physically, take it with both of your hands. Physically turn it in space, so it's the opposite of what it was. Double the spin. Double the amplitude. Double the magnitude. Double the amplitude. Keep doubling it. Double it over and over and over again until it takes on a life of its own. Until it's impossible for it to go back the way it was. When you know you've got it, slam it back in. Good.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
Yeah, that's good. Wow. Well, because it felt like someone had taken a baseball bat there. Right now. So,
Big round of applause.
After today, it was like, oh, I gotta get this thing taken down.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. You're welcome.
So then the emotional thing.
It's just same process. The only thing you got to watch out, the thing you've got to make sure you let them do. You basically change the code. So the code, just like when we load a program into our computer, it takes time for the program to load, activate, and manifest, right? System's the same way. There's going to be a bit of a lag. Just because the process is still going, try to bring it back with it. Yeah. You can't bring it back.
Can't bring it back, yeah.
Right? The one thing we have no resistance to is ourselves. If I tell him something, there's a possibility that it could not be a perfect match to his own internal environment. But when I utilize his own coding system, you don't resist yourself. Right? Unless there's a behavior or something you're trying to protect yourself from, and you start to kind of sequester yourself off, which is why people wind up in our chairs anyway. Because there's parts that aren't talking. Right? So, but when you initiate these processes, you have to stay with them. You have to be with them in the process. You notice I didn't just disengage. I was with them through the process. Because I know that 9 times out of 10, there's going to be an emotional shedding that's going to come up. There's a set of feelings that are going to want to be released because the internal environment has changed and it's going to release whatever's not in harmony with that. And I need to let him know it's okay. That it's supposed to happen and to let it happen. Because what happens many times is we go through that process and a feeling comes up and we don't want to deal with the feeling because we're taught the moment we have a feeling, we are controlling it by stuffing it back down and keeping it in there. Horse shit. Okay, it's the fastest way to get cancer. Fastest way to get any chronic illness or keep one. Okay, you've all been driving down the road on a sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, maybe your favorite tune's playing on the radio. And all of a sudden, a shitty memory from when you were 7 comes up. Do we sit there and dive headlong into it? Or do we go, fuck, I don't know if you like that. Right? We're like the bachelor who's got the hot date coming over, but he hasn't cleaned his house in 6 months. There's pizza boxes everywhere, clothes all over the floor. Does he take all that shit and throw it in the garbage? No, he stuffs it under the couch. He throws it in the closet. 3 weeks later, he goes to get his bowling ball. Ah! Right? What we do on the outside, we do on the inside. It's the law of analogy. Patterns repeat. Right? So you gotta let them know. That's supposed to happen. It's okay. Let it happen. Because as you feel it, you reveal it. As you reveal it, you keep it. It's that simple. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to think of, we're going to do what we call bucket listing. Okay? Because always what people do with this, the moment they get this cool technique, they pick the biggest, nastiest, most horrendous element of their life and throw this brand new technique at it and wonder why the shit don't work. That's anybody who buys self-help books. Okay? They get interesting information, and if by some chance they actually tell you how to do the technique instead of what to do, you barely know the technique, and you're always throwing it at the biggest, nastiest element of your life. So I developed this approach called bucket listing. Okay? Where, let's say we're dealing with fear or pain, right? You think of the biggest, nastiest, most fearful thing in your life, and feel the emotional intensity of that. That becomes your 10. Cut that in half, there's your 5. Cut that in half, there's your 2.5. And keep going, keep cutting down to smaller and smaller gradations until you have 0. Then what you do is you pick something that has an emotional intensity in the 1 or 2 range. You throw the technique at it and you nuke it. You do that 2 or 3 times at that level of emotional intensity, and you step it up to a 2 or 3. Do a few at that level, step it up to a 3 or 4. And what's happening is you're taking the process the unconscious mind uses anyway to create confidence. Because the first thing that happens, anytime you come into you guys are preaching to the choir, but I'm going to do it with the camera, is anytime information comes in, the first thing that happens is the bouncer at the gate goes, well, let's say I get a message that says, David is a flaming butthead. Maybe arguably true. Hey, we got a message, David's a flaming butthead. Is that true? I don't know, let me check. Yes, David has been a flaming butthead. Go on. Right? If in fact I get a message that says David is a wonderful human being. Hey, is David a wonderful human being? Let me check. Nice dick. There's a door. Right? We kind of do the same thing with new experiences. Whenever we run across an experience, first thing we do is, have we experienced something like this before? If so, what did we do? And then just like that captain on Galaxy Quest, Well, do that, right? It defaults to that program because that's what worked in a similar situation in the past. It's familiar, right? We're going to take that, and so what happens is you run afoul of the bouncer at the gate because you've got a brand new technique you have no history with, right? And you're dredging up the thing you're most intimately familiar with, is that feeling, and wonder why it doesn't always work. Because you're not confident. You don't have that history of success within it. So I created a way for people to build a history of success so that by the time they hit the 7s, 8s, or 9s, they're like hitting the fly with a sledgehammer. And matter of fact, by the time you hit about 4 or 5 in the process, the system automates. And they just start doing it. It's like an antivirus. It just starts doing it. So when you break up and work with partners, don't start with the 9s and 10s. Start with the 0, 1, 2, 3. Now, Barbara knows this process really, really well. I think she's the only other person, so I'm going to ask her to kind of circulate and help. But all I want you is get in either groups of 2 or 3. Probably 3 is better. But the process is very simple. Find the location. Where's that emotional moment? Feels like it's right here. Okay, so find the location. Have them physically point to it. So you've activated external. Don't even worry about what the explanation is. Just point to where you feel it. Look at it. Many times I have them physically look at it. That's optional. The more of the external senses you get involved, the more of the brain you light up. Remember, we're creating neurological absorption. Close your eyes, look at it with your inner eyes. Notice there's a color connected to that feeling. What's the color of first impression? Red. Have them reach in, grab all of that red energy. Take it out and hold it in your hands. Make sure you get it all because sometimes that shit hides.
Do you have a script? And you say the same almost exact thing. Do you have a script?
Got it. Yeah. Did the color change or stay the same? Stay the same. Excellent. Now, as you look at it, I want you to notice it's spinning in a certain direction. What direction is it spinning? Excellent. Take it in both of your hands. Physically reorient it so it's the opposite of what it was. Double the speed. Double the speed. Double the amplitude, double the magnitude. Keep doubling it until it takes on a life of its own. Until it's impossible for it to go back the way it was. And when you know you've got it, slam it back in. Notice the change. Got the feeling going out. You're going through a rough time. You can experience and let things go. It's no longer necessary to hold things inside. Because that's the only place they can hurt you. Now he'll break out in a sweat, he'll be there for a few minutes. But all you do is once you have that process going, it's just like any other physical object. Double the spin, double the amplitude. You gotta say that. Key phrase. Until it takes on a life of its own. Until it's impossible for it to go back the way it was. And when you know you've got it, key, that whole paragraph, when you know you've got it, slam it back in, physically massage the auric field, remove the energy from the point of where he slammed it, notice the change, notice it's gone.